You think you can get away with this?
Please stop hurting me!
You ever have one of those moments where the world just stops? Like the music is still playing, people are still sipping champagne, but for you, everything goes silent. That was Bella. She was on the floor. The marble felt like ice against her knees, and the smell, it was that metallic scent of blood mixed with Kennedy's expensive, suffocating cologne. She looked up, and there he was, Kennedy. His face was twisted, his tie was a mess. He looked like a man who had finally lost his grip. But then, there was Luka. He didn't look angry, he looked bored, but his eyes. They were locked on the bruise blooming across Bella's cheek, like it was the most important thing in the room. Well, that was the second everything changed. Not because of a fight, not because of a hero, but because of a deal. A cold, hard choice that was about to flip 3 lives upside down. You ever hear a sound that just stays with you? Not a scream, not a bang, just the sound of a single ice cube hitting a marble floor and sliding. That's what Bella heard. Everything else was a blur. The music from the gala was still thumping through the walls, but in this private dining room, well, it was dead quiet. Bella was on her knees. Her breath was coming out in these short, jagged hitches, like her lungs couldn't quite remember how to work. There was this warmth spreading across her forehead, dripping down near her eye. She didn't have to touch it to know what it was. Kennedy was standing over her, his shadow stretching long and jagged across the floor. His tie was loosened. His face was flushed, that ugly, deep red that only came when he'd finally lost his grip. "Get up," he whispered. It wasn't a request, it was a threat. But Bella couldn't. Her legs felt like water. She just stared at the pattern on the rug, counting the threads because if she looked up, she'd have to see the person he'd become. And then, the door clicked. Luka walked in. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, looking at the scene like he was evaluating a piece of broken furniture. He was wearing this dark suit, tailored perfectly. His watch, this heavy gold piece, glinted under the chandelier. He looked at Kennedy. Then he looked at the bruise blooming on Bella's face. And for a second, just a second, the air in the room felt like it dropped 20 degrees. "She tripped Luka," Kennedy said. His voice was shaking, trying to find that fake, charming tone he used with his business partners. Just a clumsy moment. We were just leaving. Luka didn't move. He didn't even acknowledge Kennedy was speaking. He just kept his eyes on Bella. He stepped forward, the heels of his leather shoes clicking. Slow, steady. He stopped right in front of her. He didn't reach down to pull her up. He just looked. "Is that true?" Luka asked. His voice was deep, smooth, like a cello. Bella finally looked up. Her vision was a little blurry, but she saw him. This man she'd only known as a consultant from overseas. A man Kennedy was terrified of. She saw the bandage on her own reflection in his polished shoes. She swallowed, her throat was so dry. "I want to leave." Luka nodded, just once. He turned to Kennedy. "Our deal, the one where I invest in your firm, the one that keeps you out of bankruptcy." Kennedy nodded quickly. "Yes, of course, we were just—" "It's gone," Luka said. The words were flat, no emotion. "Unless you leave her here, you walk out that door, you forget her name, and in exchange, I don't dismantle your life by Monday morning." The silence that followed was heavy. You could hear Kennedy's heavy breathing. You could hear the rain starting to tap against the windows. It wasn't a rescue. It was a transaction. And Bella, she was the currency. The walk to the parking lot felt like a dream. No, a nightmare you're starting to wake up from. The night air was cold, smelling like damp pavement and expensive perfume. Luka didn't hold her hand. He didn't offer a coat. He just walked 2 paces ahead, his back straight, his presence like a wall. They reached a car. It wasn't one of those flashy sports cars Kennedy liked. It was a Lexus RX 350, deep charcoal gray. It looked solid, safe. Luka opened the heavy door for her, the sound of it closing. Thud. It was the most beautiful sound Bella had ever heard. It meant the world was locked out. Inside, it smelled like new leather and something clean, like cedarwood. Luka got into the driver's seat. He didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there, his hands on the steering wheel. The dashboard lights cast a soft blue glow over his face. You're bleeding on my leather, he said. Bella flinched. She reached up to her forehead, her fingers trembling. I'm sorry. I'll get out. I didn't mean to. Stay, he interrupted. He reached into the glove box and pulled out a small first aid kit. He didn't hand it to her. He just looked at the road ahead. Well, if you're going to be my investment, I suggest you start by not apologizing for things you didn't do. He started the car. The engine didn't roar. It hummed. A low, vibrating purr that Bella felt in her chest. As they pulled out of the lot, she saw Kennedy standing under a street lamp, looking small, looking broken. They drove for hours, or maybe it was minutes. Time doesn't really work the same way when you're in shock. Bella watched the streetlights of Atlanta blur into long, yellow ribbons against the wet glass. Where are we going? She whispered. Luka didn't look at her. To a place where people don't ask questions. You have a family, anyone who will come looking. Bella thought about it. Her parents were gone. Her friends. Well, Kennedy had made sure those bridges were burned years ago. No one. Luka gripped the wheel a little tighter. Good, that makes the strategy easier. You'll stay in the guest wing. My housekeeper, a woman named Alara, will see to your needs. She doesn't speak much. You'll like her. Why are you doing this? Bella asked. Her voice was stronger now, but it still had that edge of fear. You don't even know me. You just threw away millions of dollars for a girl you met at dinner. Luka turned the car onto a long, winding driveway lined with ancient oaks. I didn't throw it away, Bella. I traded a bad investment for a better one. Kennedy is a sinking ship. You are the map to his offshore accounts. You're going to help me sink him, and in return, you get to live. The car stopped. The headlights illuminated a large, modern house made of glass and stone. It looked like a fortress. The front door was opened by a woman who looked like she was carved out of granite. Alara. She didn't smile. She didn't gasp at the blood on Bella's face. She just stepped aside. Clean her up, Luka said, walking past them into the shadows of the house. And Alara, no phones for either of you. Bella followed Alara down a long hallway. The floors were dark wood, polished to a mirror shine. Everything was so quiet. No shouting, no doors slamming, just the ticking of a grandfather clock in the foyer. Alara led her into a bathroom that was larger than Bella's first apartment. She started running a bath. The sound of the water was peaceful. He's not a bad man, Alara said suddenly. Her voice was raspy. But he's not a good one either. Don't confuse the two, child. Bella sat on the edge of the tub. She looked at herself in the mirror. The bandage was peeling. The bruise was a deep, angry purple. She looked broken, but for the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel hunted. I just want to sleep, Bella whispered. Sleep then, Alara replied, handing her a thick white robe. In this house, the only thing that can hurt you is the truth, and we don't tell much of that here. Bella woke up to the smell of rain, not the city rain that smelled like exhaust, but clean rain, the kind that hits the trees. She stayed in bed for a long time, watching the gray light filter through the curtains. The bed was too soft. The sheets were too expensive. It felt like she was a guest in a museum. She eventually found her way down to the kitchen. It was all stainless steel and white marble. Luka was sitting at a small table, a tablet in his hand and a cup of black coffee in front of him. He wasn't wearing the suit today, just a black sweater. He looked younger. Sit, he said, not looking up. There was a plate of fruit and some toast waiting for her. Bella sat down, her movements stiff. Did you sleep? He asked. Some, she lied. Luka finally looked at her. He set the tablet down. We start today. I need names, banks, the people Kennedy pays to keep the police away from his construction sites. Well, I need everything. Bella took a bite of toast. It tasted like ash. And if I don't remember? Luka leaned forward. You remember, Bella, a woman like you? You spent 3 years surviving a predator. You notice every detail. You notice the way he hides his phone. You notice who he calls when he thinks you're sleeping. I need those details. For the next 4 hours, they sat in his office. It was a room filled with books and the faint scent of old paper. Bella talked. Luka wrote. She told him about the private meetings Kennedy had at the docks. She told him about the man named Silas who always brought a briefcase and left with a heavy envelope. She told him about the way Kennedy would brag after 3 drinks about how he owned the local council. Luka listened with this intense focus. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just recorded it all like he was building a weapon. "He's going to come for me," Bella said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Luka stopped writing. He looked at his gold watch. "He's already tried. He sent 2 of his boys to the gate an hour ago. They decided it was in their best interest to leave." Bella's heart hammered against her ribs. "You saw them. Are they?" "They're fine," Luka said, his voice flat. "I don't use guns, Bella. I use leverage. I reminded them that I know where their mothers live. It's much more effective than a bullet." He stood up and walked to the window. "You're safe here, but the safety has a price. You stay inside. You don't call anyone. You are a ghost now." Being a ghost is harder than people think. The days started to bleed together. Bella spent most of her time in the garden or the library. She watched Luka leave in the Lexus every morning and return long after the sun had gone down. She started to notice things about him, the way he always paused before entering a room, the way he never sat with his back to a window. He wasn't a mafia boss like the movies. He was a man who lived in a state of constant, quiet war. One evening, she found him in the kitchen. He was trying to cook. It was, a disaster. There was flour on the counter and the smell of something burning. "You're doing it wrong," Bella said, stepping into the light. Luka looked at her, a spatula in his hand like a weapon. The instructions said medium heat. "Your stove is professional grade," she said, walking over. "Medium heat on this thing is like a blowtorch." She took the spatula from him. For a second, their fingers brushed. Luka didn't pull away immediately. He just stood there, watching her move. "You learned this from him?" he asked. "No," Bella said, her voice soft. "I learned this before him when I was just me." They ate dinner together that night. Not in the dining room, but on the kitchen island. It was just pasta, simple, basic. But Luka ate it like it was the best meal he'd ever had. "Why did you really take the deal?" Bella asked. "Kennedy is a snake, but you could have just let him go. Why involve me?" Luka was silent for a long time. He turned his wine glass in circles on the marble. "Well," he started, then paused. "My father was a man like Kennedy. He liked to own things, people. My mother was. She was an investment that didn't pay off for him. One day, he decided he was done with her." Bella stopped eating. "I was 10, Luka continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "I watched him walk her to the door, no money, no shoes, just discarded. I told myself then that if I ever had power, I would never use it to break someone. I would only use it to break the people who think breaking others is a hobby." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You weren't a strategic choice, Bella. You were a reminder of why I do what I do." The peace didn't last. It never does. The next morning, Bella was in the garden when she heard a car. Not the Lexus. This was a loud, aggressive engine. A black SUV was idling at the gate. She froze. Her first instinct was to run, to hide under the bed like she used to when Kennedy came home late. But then she saw Luka. He was walking down the driveway, alone. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't even have his hands out of his pockets. He reached the gate and stood there, a thin line of a man against a machine. The window of the SUV rolled down. Bella couldn't see who was inside, but she heard the voice. It was Sila's, Kennedy's right hand. "He wants her back, Luka. He says she stole something, a ledger, something that belongs to the firm." Luka laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Tell Kennedy that if he wants his property back, he can come get it himself. But tell him to bring his lawyer and a priest. He's going to need both by the time I'm done with him." The SUV roared and sped off, kicking up gravel. Luka didn't turn around. He just stood there, looking at the road. Bella ran to him. "They're going to come back. They'll bring more people. Luka, you have to let me go. I'm not worth your life." Luka finally turned. He looked at her, his eyes cold and hard again. You're right, you're not worth my life, but the principal is worth everything. Now get back inside. We have work to do. The house felt smaller after the SUV left. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind in the oak trees. It felt like a footstep. Bella stayed in the library, her knees pulled up to her chest. She watched Luka through the glass doors. He was packing the terrace, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a low, rhythmic hum. Well, he said, stepping back inside. He looked tired. The shadows under his eyes were deeper than they were this morning. Kennedy is panicking. He's frozen the joint accounts, which means he's cut off your access to anything. He thinks he's starving you out. Bella let out a dry, jagged laugh. I've been starving for 3 years, Luka. A bank account isn't going to change that. Luka stopped packing. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time his expression wasn't a calculation. It was, empathy? No, that's too soft a word. It was recognition. He's moving the ledger tonight, Luka said, his voice dropping. The real one, the one with the signatures, if we get that. It's not just a lawsuit, it's a cage, for good. How? Bella asked. Her heart started that familiar, frantic thudding. We don't steal it, Luka replied, a cold smirk touching his lips. We make him give it to us, but for that, I need you to be the bait. You have to see him, Bella, one last time. The drive to the meeting point was silent. The Lexus felt like a pressurized cabin, keeping the rest of the world at bay. The smell of rain was back, thick and heavy, sticking to the windows in long, distorted streaks. Luka pulled over a block away from the old warehouse district near the Savannah River. He turned off the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. You don't have to do this, Luka said. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the steering wheel, his thumbs tracing the leather stitching. I can find another way. It'll take longer and it might be messier, but you don't have to walk into that room. Bella looked at her hands. They weren't shaking anymore. That was the strange part. When she was with Kennedy, she was always vibrating like a wire pulled too tight. Now, she felt heavy, solid. If I don't do it, she whispered, he'll always be the ghost in my hallway. I need to see him lose. Luka reached over. He didn't grab her hand. He just placed his palm on the center console, inches from hers. He can't touch you. I'm right outside. If I hear so much as a gasp, well, the strategy goes out the window and I handle it my way. The sound of the heavy car door closing when she stepped out. Thud. It felt like a gavel hitting a desk. The trial was starting. The warehouse smelled like salt, old wood, and rot. It was a cavernous space, filled with crates and the echoing drip of a leaky roof. Kennedy was standing in the center, under a single, flickering industrial light. He looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was greasy, and his eyes were darting around like a trapped animal. When he saw Bella, he took a step forward, a sickly sweet smile twisting his face. Bella, he breathed. My beautiful, stupid girl, I knew you'd come back. Luka, he's just using you, you know, a man like that. He doesn't have a heart, he has a ledger. Speaking of ledgers, Bella said. Her voice didn't crack. She surprised herself. Pause. I know where you kept the offshore routing numbers, Kennedy. I know about the donations to the Port Authority. Kennedy's smile vanished. His face turned that familiar, bruised purple. You wouldn't. You're nothing without me. You're a waitress from a town nobody can find on a map. I made you. No, Bella said, stepping into the light so he could see the bandage on her forehead. You broke me, but it turns out, when you break something, the edges get sharp. Give it to me, Kennedy hissed, reaching into his jacket. He didn't pull a gun. Luka was right. Kennedy was too much of a coward for that. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound book, the physical proof of 10 years of human trafficking and bribery. You give me the login to the encrypted drive you took, Kennedy said, his voice shaking. And I let you walk. I'll even give you enough money to disappear, somewhere far, somewhere Luka can't find you. Bella felt a presence behind her. She didn't have to turn around to know it was Luka. She could feel the temperature in the room shift. Luka stepped out of the shadows, his hands casually in his pockets. Well, that's a very generous offer, Kennedy, truly, but there's a slight problem with your math. Kennedy flinched, nearly dropping the book. Luka, this is between me and my woman, stay out of it. She hasn't been your woman since the second you put your hands on her at that gala, Luka said. He walked forward, his footsteps silent on the concrete. And as for the ledger, you're not giving it to her. You're giving it to the men standing in the back of the room. From the darkness, 3 men stepped forward. They weren't Luka's men. They were the investors Kennedy had been stealing from. The look on Kennedy's face, it wasn't fear. It was a complete, total collapse. He looked down at the book in his hand, then at the men who had trusted him with their millions. It's a misunderstanding, Kennedy stuttered. I was just securing the assets. One of the men, an older guy with a face like a bulldog, spat on the floor. Luka showed us the offshore accounts, Kennedy. He showed us where our money went while you were buying diamonds for your clumsy girlfriend. Luka looked at Bella, a silent question. Are you ready? Bella nodded. She didn't want to hear the rest. She didn't want to see the pleading or the crying that she knew was coming. She turned her back on Kennedy, the man who had been her entire world of pain, and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard the ledger hit the floor. She heard the sound of men talking in low, angry voices, but she didn't look back. As she reached the door, she felt Luka's hand on the small of her back. It wasn't possessive. It was a guiding. It's over, Bella, he whispered. The debt is paid. They didn't go back to the fortress. Instead, Luka drove toward the coast. The rain had turned into a light mist, wrapping the city in a soft, gray blanket. He pulled the Lexus up to a small, quiet pier. The water of the Atlantic was dark and restless, reflecting the lights of the distant cargo ships. Why here? Bella asked. Luka leaned back in his seat. He looked older tonight, not tired, just settled. This is where my mother used to come before the end. She used to say the ocean was the only thing that didn't belong to anyone. You can't buy it. You can't own it. It just is. Bella looked at him. The gold watch was still there, the expensive suit was still there, but the man was different. Luka, she said. Yes. Thank you. Luka didn't say you're welcome. He didn't say it was part of the deal. He just nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Well, I suppose it's time we figured out what you want to do next. Not what I want, not what the strategy needs, just you. For the first time in her life, Bella didn't have an answer. The silence wasn't scary, though. It was wide, like the ocean. I don't know, she admitted. I don't even know what I like to eat when I'm not being told what to order. I don't know what color I want to paint my walls. Luka turned to her. He reached out, and this time he actually touched her. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were cold, but his touch was incredibly gentle. Then we find out, he said. The house in Atlanta, it's yours for as long as you need it. Alara stays. The security stays. But the doors are unlocked, Bella. You can walk out whenever you want. Bella felt a lump in her throat. And you, where do you go? Luka sighed, a long, shaky breath. I have businesses in Seoul, in London. I've spent my life moving from one strategic position to another. But, I think I'd like to stay in Savannah for a while, if that's okay with the owner of the house. A small, genuine smile broke across Bella's face. I think the owner would like that. The weeks that followed were strange. The Mafia Boss and the survivor didn't fit anymore. Instead, there was a man who liked his coffee too strong and a woman who spent 4 hours in a bookstore just because she could. They didn't talk about Kennedy. They didn't talk about the ledger. They talked about the way the light hit the oak trees in the morning. They talked about the sound of the Lexus engine. One afternoon, Bella was in the garden, planting something. She didn't even know what it was, just something green and hopeful, when Luka walked out. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in jeans and a t-shirt. He looked human. Well, he said, looking at her muddy hands, I see the investment is getting dirty. Bella laughed, wiping her forehead with her arm. It's good for the soul, Luka. You should try it. Luka looked at the dirt, then at his own perfectly manicured hands. He sat down on the grass next to her. Maybe later, for now, I just wanted to tell you. Kennedy's trial starts tomorrow. You don't have to be there. I've handled the depositions. Bella sat back on her heels. The mention of his name didn't make her flinch anymore. It just felt like an old scar. Will he go away for a long time? She asked. Life, Luka said simply. Between the fraud and the other things we found. He won't see the sun from anything but a barred window ever again. Bella nodded. She looked up at the sky. It was a deep, brilliant blue. You did that, she said. We did that, Luka corrected. He reached out and took her hand, mud and all. He didn't care about the investment anymore. He didn't care about the strategy. He was just a man holding the hand of the woman he'd accidentally learned to love. The news came through on a Tuesday. A quiet Tuesday afternoon in Savannah where the only sound was the wind chimes on the back porch. Luka was in the study, and for the first time, he wasn't looking at a spreadsheet. He was looking at a map of the coast. It's done, he said, his voice barely above a whisper as Bella walked in. He didn't need to say what. The TV in the corner was muted, but the headline was scrolling in bright, jagged red. Local real estate magnate SENT to life. Kennedy's face looked gray on the screen, his eyes hollow, like he'd already been a ghost for years. Bella stood there, her hand gripping the doorframe. She expected to feel a surge of triumph or maybe a wave of heat. But instead, she just felt light. Like a weight she'd been carrying since she was 20 had finally been set on the ground. Do you want to see him? Luka asked. He stood up, his gold watch catching the light. I can arrange a visit, 1 minute, just so you can see the bars. Bella looked at the screen, then back at Luka. She saw the man who had bought her, protected her, and then, finally, let her go. No, she said. I don't want to waste another second of my life on a man who's already dead. Let's go for a drive. The Lexus asterisk pulled out of the driveway, but this time, the heavy iron gates stayed open. Luka didn't punch in a code. He didn't check the rearview mirror for SUVs. He just drove. They headed toward the city center, toward the places Bella used to be afraid to go. They passed the park where Kennedy had once made a scene. They passed the restaurant where the gala had changed everything. You're not flinching, Luka noted. He kept one hand on the wheel and reached out with the other, resting it on the center console. I'm not, Bella realized. She rolled down the window. The humid Georgia air smelled like jasmine and old brick. I think the city feels different when you're not looking for an exit sign. Luka pulled the car over near a small, inconspicuous office building. Well, since you're not looking for an exit, maybe you're looking for an entrance. He handed her a set of keys, not car keys, small, silver keys on a simple ring. What's this? The deed to the gallery on Bull Street, he said. The one you mentioned you liked, it's not a gift, Bella, it's an investment. In you run it, you own it. And if it fails, well, then we'll just have to try something else. The gallery was empty, filled with nothing but dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. Bella walked across the hardwood floors, her footsteps echoing. It was a clean slate. Why, Luka? She asked, turning to face him. He was leaning against the doorframe, looking more like a man and less like a boss than she'd ever seen him. Because, he said, I realized something while we were hiding out. I'm very good at destroying things, Bella. I've spent my whole life dismantling empires. But you're good at making things grow, even in the dirt. He walked toward her, stopping just a few inches away. The smell of his cedarwood cologne was there, but it didn't feel suffocating anymore. It felt like a foundation. I don't want to be the man who saved you, he whispered. I want to be the man who watches you become whoever you want to be, even if that person, well, even if she doesn't need me anymore. Bella reached up and touched his face. The stubble was rough against her palm. The thing is, Luka, I don't need you to save me, but I think I want you to stay anyway. A week later, the past tried to knock one last time. A phone call from Seoul. Luka's associates, men with names like chairman and director, didn't understand why he was still in Georgia. They think I've gone soft, Luka told her one night as they sat on the porch. the crickets providing a rhythmic backdrop to their conversation. They think I'm losing my edge because I haven't come back to finish the merger. Are you? Bella asked. She was sketching in a notebook, her first real hobby in years. Luka smiled. It was a slow, dangerous smile, but it wasn't aimed at her. No, I told them that I'm not losing my edge. I'm just sharpening a different blade. I'm moving the headquarters here, Bella. Savannah is. Well, it's quiet. People don't look too closely at a man in a Lexus. He leaned back, looking up at the stars. And besides, I hear the owner of a local gallery has a very influential partner. It would be bad for business to leave her. The opening night of the gallery wasn't like the gala. There were no cameras, no important men in wrinkled suits, just local artists, a few neighbors, and a Lara who wore a dress that almost made her look like she might smile. Bella wore the red top from that night, the one she was wearing when everything broke. She had it tailored, the silk repaired where it had been torn. It wasn't a reminder of the pain, it was a badge of the survival. Luka stood in the corner, a glass of water in his hand, watching her move through the crowd. He didn't intervene. He didn't protect her from the guests. He just watched, his eyes full of a quiet, steady pride. "You look like you've seen a ghost," a guest said to him. "No," Luka replied, his voice deep and certain. "I'm looking at the future, and for the first time in my life, it's not a calculation, it's just beautiful." The party ended. The lights were dimmed. The last guest had wandered out into the warm Savannah night. Bella and Luka walked back to the car. The Lexus Asterisk was waiting under the street lamp, its charcoal paint gleaming. "You tired?" Luka asked, opening the door for her. "Exhausted," Bella admitted. She slid into the leather seat and felt that familiar, grounding hum as he started the engine. "But it's a good kind of tired, the kind where you know you've done something real." Luka pulled the door shut. That sound, it used to mean she was trapped. It used to mean she was being moved from one cage to another. But as they drove through the quiet streets, past the moss-draped oaks and the sleeping houses, Bella realized the sound had changed. It didn't sound like a lock anymore. It sounded like a heartbeat. They arrived back at the house that was now hers officially. But as they walked up the steps, Luka stopped. "Well," he said, his hands in his pockets, "I think my work here is done, Bella. You have the gallery, you have the house. Kennedy is gone, you're free." He started to turn, to walk back toward the guest wing, but Bella caught his sleeve. "Luka." He stopped. "The strategy is over," she said. "The deal is done, everything we did to get here. It's in the past." She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "So I'm asking you, not as a business partner, not as a ghost, as a woman who finally has a choice. Stay, not because you have to, not because of a contract, just stay." Luka looked at her for a long, silent minute. He didn't look for a tactical advantage. He didn't check his watch. He just reached out and pulled her into him, his chin resting on the top of her head. "I think," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion he finally didn't try to hide. "I think I've been waiting for you to ask that since the second I saw that ice cube hit the floor." The rain started again, a soft, gentle patter against the roof. Inside, the lights were warm, the coffee was brewing, and the two of them, well, they were finally just two people, making a choice to be together. And that was the only justice that ever really mattered.